Very good. Good morning, everybody. I've got a certain déjà vu feeling about this morning because we were all here a few months ago when I said that after more than 2 decades of giving my life to UKIP party politics, the time had come to step back, the time had come to get my life back. And I thought that was that. We did go through a leadership election, but we didn't really get a new leader. So whoever wins today, I'm going to make absolutely sure that by the close of play tonight, they have signed the Electoral Commission documentation. Yeah, they will be. The new leader will be signing this, if necessary, in blood. Okay. It's who's it going to be? You'll find out in a moment. It's not been the greatest few months for UKIP. I think the PR that we've had has been pretty bad, and yet it hasn't really made much difference. Our support in the polls out there is still very, very solid. And I just thought for a minute I might reflect on what we've achieved. Do you know, since World War II, there have been scores of political parties set up in this country. Virtually none of them have ever gone anywhere. And yet we took UKIP, we took it to winning a national election in 2014, the first time since 1906 a party that wasn't Labour or Tory had won a national poll. We got it in a general election to nearly 4 million votes, which, given the first past the post system, was pretty stunning. We won a couple of parliamentary by-elections, and above all, what we've really done is we've shifted the centre of gravity of British politics. It is quite some achievement. Whether it's being allowed to discuss immigration without being written off as being extremists, whether it's championing the idea of selective education to aid social mobility, whether it's being critical of the foreign aid budget, or whether, above all, it's about why we should not be part of a political union with the EU based in Brussels. On all of these areas and many more, when we first started to talk and started to campaign on these things, we were mocked and derided. The establishment political elite could not be rude about us, even if they tried. The fact is we've done it, and the fact is that without us, there would not have been a referendum. Of that there is no question at all. And we played an absolutely crucial role in that referendum campaign. It is to my deep regret that certain slightly snobby Tories didn't want to work with us, but hey, that's life. I've seen a bit more of that in the last couple of weeks, haven't I? But either way, whichever group you supported, or whether you supported both in that referendum campaign, the fact is that the ground campaign could not have happened without UKIP branches and UKIP members. And not only did we get that referendum, we played an absolutely crucial role in securing that great historic result on June the 3rd. So I thank all of you for that and all that you've done. And the result of that referendum, well, it's certainly been pretty seismic in terms of British politics, but I think I would argue it may just have had a bit of an effect on the other side of the Atlantic. Now, normally when it comes to trends, be it social trends or political trends, over the years you would think generally, you know, if New York catches a cold, then London sneezes. But in this particular amazing, transformative, and indeed in many ways revolutionary year of 2016, it is Brexit that directly led to the establishment getting beaten on the 8th of November and Donald J. Trump about to take the presidency. We were the inspiration behind much of that, and I'm pleased for it. And across the rest of Europe too, be in no doubt that it is UKIP that is seen as the leading Eurosceptic group across the entire continent. It is UKIP that is the inspiration for Eurosceptic parties, both big and small, right across the continent. And it's UKIP's success in this referendum that says to people who don't normally bother to vote because they assume they're going to get beaten by the establishment, no, it's UKIP's achievement in getting and helping to win this referendum that says to voters across the whole of Europe, actually, if you go out there and you turn out, this rotten liberal establishment can be beaten. And I think for those who think 2016 has been an awful year, and I, by the way, am not one of them, I've rather enjoyed most of it, but for those who think it's been an awful year, well, I'm sorry, folks, there's a lot more bad news to come. And it'll start next Sunday in Italy, where Renzi will probably lose that referendum. And my guess is that it'll also happen in Austria next Sunday, where a candidate will win the presidency who is now committed to campaigning for Austria to have a referendum on their membership of the Union. And then we roll in next year to elections in the Netherlands, in Germany and in France. And whilst the incumbents may just about hold on in all of those countries, the fact that this project is now fatally weakened, I have no doubt. And it's our, I think, historic role to have shown people the way. So there is a lot more to come. And what of UKIP? Well, of course, I was told when Mr. Cameron gave the famous Bloomberg speech that the UKIP fox had been shot. There was no need for UKIP anymore because the Conservative Party were promising a referendum. It would be the end of UKIP and any potential electoral strength the party could have. And what happened? Actually, by promising that referendum, what Cameron did, indeed, was to validate our position and make us go on to greater strength. And of course, in the wake of the referendum, we were told, well, that's it, it's all over, it's game up, UKIP is not needed anymore in British politics, they can pack their tents and they can go away. Well, I have to say, even if people did believe that to be true back in June or July, and even if the Prime Minister's initial words were enormously encouraging, which they were, weren't they? You know, Brexit means Brexit and all the rest of it. I think now the need for UKIP to be strong in the future is absolutely vital. And I think what has surprised a lot of people is that despite a difficult summer for the party, despite all of that, what the opinion polls show you is that if there was a general election tomorrow, 4 million people would still go out and vote UKIP, despite the difficult time that we've had. It is very difficult to get people to break away under a first-past-the-post system from their traditional tribal allegiances. There are lots of people out there who vote the same way as their grandparents voted 100 years ago. They see themselves to be a Labour family or to be a Conservative family. But once they've broken those bonds and come to UKIP, actually what's begun to happen is they now see themselves as UKIP voters. They see themselves as UKIP families, and they believe that by switching their vote, they've actually played a part in their own way in making British history. And they're very happy, they're very pleased, and they're very proud about it. And I get all this stuff. I'm told that UKIP voters are all old and all angry and all negative and all want to go back to the 1950s. They're also imbued by pessimism. And yet the opinion poll in July, a big opinion poll of UKIP voters, showed that 86% of UKIP voters in July, post the referendum, were optimistic and upbeat and thought an independent Britain had a great future. There's no need for pessimism anymore in UKIP. But there are two other factors that say that the new leader of UKIP inherits potentially a very strong position. The first is the party whose hierarchy have spent most of the weekend telling us what an absolutely wonderful and indeed awe-inspiring political giant Fidel Castro was. Not to worry about the thousands of people he killed, imprisoned, the lack of democracy. No, absolutely, to Mr. Corbyn's Labour Party, this man was a great, shining hero. This Labour Party, led by a leader who refuses to sing the national anthem, and this Labour Party, who seemed to think, or at least they did till last week, that putting Diane Abbott on national television will somehow be good for their vote, when with every sentence she utters about attitudes towards immigration, she basically abuses over half the traditional old Labour vote. Old Labour This Labour Party offers nothing to old Labour voters who voted for Brexit. And if you look at the constituencies from the Midlands right up through the north of England, you see in seat after seat where over 50% of the Labour electorate voted for Brexit, they have MPs who have almost no sympathy with that position at all. Old Labour has absolutely nowhere else to go other than to come to UKIP, and I recommend that the next leader spends a lot of his time, I'm guessing it's going to be a he, but we'll see, spends a lot of his time focused. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I got Brexit right. I got Trump right, but I didn't get Leicester City, so there we are. And the third reason why UKIP not only potentially has a stronger electoral future than it's had in the past, but is equally vital to be there in the national interest, is that so many of those high hopes we had in the early days of Theresa May's premiership are now beginning to look at best a little bit confused. You know, I saw the autumn statement last week. It was same old, same old. It wasn't an inspiring, address, was it, for a country that had just made a big, radical constitutional decision. We hear cabinet ministers saying, maybe we'll stay in the customs union, maybe we'll stay in the single market, and others that say that we won't. Now, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I do know this. Given that the Conservatives are 14 points ahead of Labour in the opinion polls, if there is not a significant electoral threat, and that can only, frankly, on this issue come from UKIP, then the chances are that at that referendum, what we voted for could get significantly watered down. That must not be allowed to happen. So the next leader of UKIP takes over a party that might have had a difficult couple of months, but is in a good, solid financial position, still maintains its base of 4 million votes in the polls, and I think everything is to play for. And I am happy and confident that I'm handing this over at a good time, albeit delayed by just a few months from what I wanted. As for me, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go on supporting UKIP. Am I going to be a backseat driver? No. Will I support the new leader of UKIP if they ask me to help? Yes. I intend to see out my time in the European Parliament, where I think, after Article 50, there may well be quite a lot of focus and quite a lot of attention. I will go on presenting radio shows and writing and doing some of the things I've developed over the course of the summer. And this week, I'm going off to the United States of America, but you'll understand, purely as a tourist, nothing more than that. I don't regret for 1 minute that I've devoted most of the best years of my adult life to building up this party and to fighting for this cause. It was the right thing to do. I'm proud to have done it, and I thank those, many of you, who've helped me over the last quarter of a century. And now is time. I think we're going to have an announcement rather shortly, and now will be the time to get behind our new leader. From me, a big, big thank you.
Well, there's Nigel Farage saying he will not be a backseat driver, and despite the difficulties of the past few months, suggesting UKIP has still all to play for. Interesting, though, he suggested it was a he who is going to be the next UKIP leader. That would suggest that the favourite, Paul Nuttall, is the man likely to take over from Nigel Farage. Interesting, too, that Mr Farage seemed to endorse what has been Paul Nuttall's strategy and approach, and that is to focus on the Labour vote, which he believes is soft, and where he believes UKIP now has to try and build and develop its support.
You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.